As a comic creator, naturally I am also a fan of comics, so I went digging through the dollar bins of America's largest comic book store in search of some hidden gems. And I'm not talking about those key issues with the first appearance of your favorite character. I'm talking about those hidden gems that when you look at them, you're like, how did this even get printed? Greetings everyone, welcome to the underground lair where we bring our creations to life. I'm Scott with Serkworks Art Labs. I'm a professional illustrator, designer, and mad creator, and one of the things that I create is comics. I am a self-publisher of comics. This is my title, Young and the Dead. It is a kids versus zombie adventure story. If you're into Goonies, it's kind of like Goonies meets Night of the Living Dead. So because I self-publish, I am a big fan of others who self-publish, and I seek out self-published work. And I'm particularly a fan of the stuff that you would find in the black and white boom of the 80s. I mean, right around the time when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles hit the scene, and self-publishing that black and white stuff was just huge. So recently I went to Colorado and I visited Mile High Comics, which is, I believe, America's largest comic book retailer. And I dug through what seemed like hundreds of, dollar comic long boxes in search of these hidden gems, these rare comics, kind of unloved comics, many of them forgotten. They're not like these special issues that are, obviously I'm looking in the dollar bin for this stuff, but I'm just looking for these things that I'm like, I look at it, I'm like, how did this get printed? Because nowadays, as self-publishers, to be honest, we've got it easy with print on demand. We can, for a low investment, we can print up even like 25 copies and get those out to people. But back in the days, it wasn't that easy. So I'm always fascinated by these sort of entrepreneurial creators, a lot of them really young, that, publish their own comic, and what they had to go through back in the day to do that for something that you might look at and say, wow, this is kind of unusual. Something that a publisher would never really even look at, but they had the will and the drive to self-publish these works and get those out there, and they are out there, and I'm looking for them. So I'm going to show you a little bit of my comic book haul, some of these indie comics and everything that I picked up in the dollar bins, explain why I was attracted to these certain issues, and why I am such a fan of self-publishing, and anytime I can find these hidden gems, I'm like, wow, this is awesome. So let me share that stuff with you right now. Okay, so here's my haul of comics from Mile High Comics. So these first three I did not pick up in the dollar bin. These were in these were the regular price ones. But the Battlestar Galactica 1 through 3, I'm obviously, one of my holy grail comics would probably be Star Wars #1. I almost bought it at one point, and back in the day I used to have the big Whitman oversized collection, and it got so torn up and lost. But so this is kind of the next best thing to me. I'm a pretty big fan of Battlestar Galactica as well. Used to watch it all the time, and so the first 3 issues, I don't think this is the first movie adaptation, the whole thing. I think there's probably 3 more issues in order to get that, so I may go back or go online. But Ernie Colon art, just great. This is great stuff. Like I said, it's not quite the Al Williams Star Wars, but for me it's the next best thing, so happy to get those. Now these are my dollar store finds. So these first few of them here, so this is 1963 Image Comics. These are pretty easy to find, of course. A lot of these in the dollar store, in the dollar bins, are going to be easy to find. But the thing I really like about these, and I have the first issue, I bought it back in the day when it first came out, and then I didn't continue buying them, but these are really great because it's basically what if Image Comics had existed back in 1963, and some of the creators involved in these, and it's just fun because it goes back to that old kind of 60s aesthetic and the storytelling and everything. So I found this. There were tons of this particular The Fury in the dollar bins. So I'm like, oh, maybe I can find the other ones, and I kept going through, and even though, like I said, if I went online I could find these pretty easily, but just actually anytime one popped up and I'm like, oh, is that a different one that I don't have? And so I found Tomorrow Syndicate, which I think is the final issue, where it actually wraps up, I think, and it spoiler alert somewhere in here, where we go, it ties in with the current Image Comics universe and everything. So I don't know, these are kind of great. So I did find 3 of them. So I have 4, I think, of the 6. So I'll have to find those other ones there. So that I picked up this crazy. Where's the other one? There was another one in here. Okay. Crazy Man. I don't know. These two number ones. Different, I guess, iterations or whatever. I don't know anything about this comic other than it's Neil Adams Company Continuity Comics, and I'm always interested in. I like for some reason their color sticks out to me, the way they did the coloring and everything. And you can see that. Have you ever seen Bucky O'Hare, which is also a Continuity Comics title? I'm really fascinated by the color. I think it's really great. And then this one has a kind of a cool gimmick here with this kind of die cut face and everything. This one's a little more glossy, so I'm not as crazy about that. But I don't know, something about Continuity Comics sticks out to me, and also a fan of Neil Adams, who did. I don't think he illustrated that one, but here's another one here. I don't know. This is just an old. I used to collect this sort of Sword of the Atom, and I kind of picked this up. Gil Kane art. Really great stuff. So, for $1, yeah. This one I picked up. I think this is all Neil Adams artwork. This is Pacific Comics, which they were the first publisher of like Gru and everything. So yeah, I like this stuff. I mean, this kind of looks like a cool title. I haven't read it, but so pick that up. Pacific Comics. I found this Megaton Man, Don Simpson. Great cartooning. This just muscles upon muscles. Megaton Man, great stuff. Robo Hunter, I'm not too familiar with this other than I know Eagle Comics in the 80s they were publishing like 2000 AD and Judge Dredd. So this is a UK comic publisher. Looks like pretty cool stuff. I'm not as familiar with this, but I definitely wanted to check that out. The Fly. So The Fly, this was DC Comics purchased, and I forgot what company they purchased them from. But like there's The Fly, I don't know if they're in here. The Fly, the Shield, the Comet, Jaguar, all these characters that they had purchased, and they started this line called Impact. I don't know much about this. I remember in the 80s Remco released these really cheesy action figures based on this line of characters. And I was just like, what is this? That was my first introduction to these characters. But it might be interesting to read that. So I got that. Picked up this Moon Shadow. This is a comic that I have a few of from back in the day. The painting is just obviously amazing. So I figured, yeah, for $1, why not pick that up? Because beautiful artwork there. An epic comic title. I got these 3 Geek comics. I'm not too familiar with this, but I love the cartooning in here. Just super, I don't know when this came out, but it seems like it's, sort of that pop culture thing, Kevin Smith style stuff. Probably, maybe before Kevin Smith. Again, I don't know when that came out, but, that looks really interesting in reading that. Picked up this issue of the Nam. I'm a big fan of Michael Golden's artwork, so I don't have this. I think I stopped I have probably the first maybe 10 or so maybe this is right after, but I don't think I have this one. So I picked this one up. Again, love Michael Golden stuff. Paul Chadwick, Concrete. This is just a little preview image, but Concrete's definitely worth $1 anytime you can pick up something like that. I found this Samurai, and then this is, I think I have a second printing of this somewhere. I already had this second printing. I don't think, even though it went to a second print, I don't think it's worth anything. But Aerosol Comics, now we're getting into kind of the stuff that I really wanted to talk about. This black and white boom that happened in the 80s. And Aerosol is pretty good publisher. I mean, they had some really competent artists, but it's all kind of that black and white stuff. I never read Samurai. My brother used to collect this one called Elf Quest, or not Elf Quest, but Elf Lord. And then I was collecting Warlock 5 because they had these amazing airbrush covers. But Aerosol's kind of an interesting indie comic publisher, but they put out quite a few titles. I don't know if it lists any of the other titles they have, but yeah, there's Elf Lord right there. Yeah, and I'm not familiar with Underground, but they put out some good stuff. So anytime I can find that in a dollar bin, that's cool. All right, so here we go with another. I'm not too familiar with Pied Piper Comics, but I picked up a couple of these. Again, this isn't totally what my kind of holy grail, the stuff that that piques my interest. I mean, not that it's not good or anything. The artwork is a little maybe too good. The stuff that wows me is when I'm like that. Again, that stuff that's like, how did this even get published? and I'll kind of get into a little bit of that, but yeah, not too bad. It looks like they've got a few different titles here, but this is all, you know, obviously back. This one I did not pick up. This one I already had. This is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #2. I think it's like a third printing, so don't get too excited. It's not worth anything. But, you know, I mean, once Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you know, Eastman and Laird blew up, it just opened up the gates for people to self-publish, and a lot of that black and white stuff, which I just wish there was more. There was more of that now. I published my book in black and white, but, you know, obviously, you know, I love that sort of era of comics. So here's another issue. This looks like it might even be a spin-off or something. Very, very similar characters. Ex-Mutants, the New Humans. I'm guessing. Oh, see, I was going to say maybe they had to change the name, so they went to this, but that wouldn't be right. Or unless maybe this came out first and they just rebooted it with a different name. I don't know. Who knows? That's the interesting thing. All right, so here we're getting into some of the stuff that I'm talking about. So this is so Silver Wolf Comics. They put out a lot of stuff. This is another one. This one I've had, you know, already in my collection. This is Grips. So Silver Wolf did these. If you ever watch Cartoonist Kayfabe, and if you don't, I recommend you do. They've kind of coined this phrase outlaw comics, which is this ultra violent. Here you can kind of see this guy getting shot through the eye with this, and then and just all this super ultra violent stuff. But it's you know, the artwork's a little more raw than you might see. I mean, Tim Vigil's obviously, he's a pretty good artist. But you know, look at this stuff. But so outlaw comics are, you know, it's usually like black and white comics. It's not as polished, obviously, as what you would see in the mainstream comics. But you know, ultra violent, that type of stuff. So I'm looking for that, just because when I was a kid, even though modern comics, I don't really pick up that kind of, a lot of that stuff. It's just not my thing anymore. But going back to when I was a kid, I was all into, of course, you know, people getting torn apart by, you know, vigilante superheroes and all that kind of stuff. So this is also by Silver Wolf Comics, and they did a lot of this stuff. And you know, you can pick out a lot of this stuff because their graphic design is just so wonky and pretty horrible that it's good, you know, with this border around here. I mean, how much better would this look if this was full size and didn't have this blue border? But anyway, but you can always kind of pick some of their stuff and just look at the logo. It's this little tiny hand-drawn kind of wonky logo. Art in this one's not too bad. Another thing that I'm looking for is Power Comics. Now, I'll try to remember to leave a link to also Cartoonist Cafe, but Power Comics. It's this comic book channel where they have, again, coined this phrase Power Comics. And this is not, I wouldn't say this probably wouldn't qualify as a power comic, but Power Comics are kind of what I'm looking for. These indie things that, like, young artists, you know, probably very inexperienced, but they self-publish and everything, and you look at them like, this is crazy to even find this in a comic store, that they printed a number of these comics and they're actually circulated and they're out there, that they went through distribution, all of that stuff. So definitely, we'll talk a little more about Power Comics as I go on. This one, they have a thing where they judge them on whether they're Power Comics or not, and there's a certain criteria. They would probably not pick this one as a power comic, but to me it's pretty close. So but anyway, and I think Silverworth Comics, anything by Silver Wolf, straddles that line between outlaw and power comics. So here's another one that when I picked up, that I'm like, what is this? So I don't know. This is kind of like, it looks like sort of an airman that fights the Nazis and stuff. It's getting closer to that Power Comics level, I think. I mean, there's just certain things you look for. Let's see, I'm looking if there's any of those telltale signs of that. But yeah, again, not the most polished artwork, but pretty competent. I didn't find anything crazy, like super, like so raw that it's just blows you away. I found this one here, Black Star. Let's see, this is. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's kind of, you know, it's got some humorous stuff. The other thing is this one might be a little more self-aware. That's one of the things when they're judging Power Comics. If it kind of knows that it's a little, I don't know, off the beaten path or everything. If it's self-aware of that, it may not fit that criteria. But this one, right here, I think this is let's see if I can get that glare out of there. I think this is a good indication or a good example of a power comic. I've never seen this thing before. Black Moon, this is definitely something that was, you know, self-published, probably by a young artist, I'm guessing. That's sort of the thing. And a lot of it, it's probably a little more on the violent side. But as far as power comics, you know, it's something that's unconventional. You might find some misspellings in it. There's usually a letter to the reader. And there's usually this idea of sometimes they talk about how this particular comic is, you know, it's sort of my answer to the mainstream stuff, and this is why, you know, and it's kind of, and I was like, and the reason why I like these comics is because I was exactly this kind of creator. And I don't have my first comic that I published. It was just an ash can, but it was definitely right along with the, you know, in line with this kind of stuff. So this stuff reminds me so much of the stuff that I was into, or the stuff that I was creating back, you know, back when I was a kid. And usually Power Comics, let's see the date on this one. Again, the black and white explosion. So this is, does it have a date? Copyright 1983. So that's right in there. So that, you know, sort of early mid 80s, 90s. Once you get into the 90s, it kind of goes, stuff started to gear more towards not so much like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff, but more towards Image Comics. So it's mainly the 80s are these sort of power comics. But it's usually this lofty vision, and it kind of falls short. Like, oh, I've got all these issues that are coming out and everything, and usually it's one issue. It's usually a single creator, you know, or one or two creators that put, you know, a comic book together. So anyway, but this one I think fits the criteria. The artwork is pretty raw. But it's great. You know, you got this guy here, the eyes are too close. Storytelling is pretty much what you expect. You know, obviously, you know, a vigilante. This guy's probably a corrupt politician, it looks like. This is exactly the kind of stuff I did. But, you know, this thing is so raw. This would have to be, I mean, it just, I don't know, just this young creator, I'm sure, that somehow found a way to sort of make his dreams come true, and publish his own comic. Who is the artist on this anyway? James Charlotte, I think. It's, yeah, written, created, and illustrated. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Again, look how close the eyes are together. The anatomy is, I mean, this is kind of stuff that I was doing. And like, let me just kind of skip through here. Yeah, great. The little bit of Zipatone, probably not too much Zipatone, but I just light up when I see this stuff. But here, this is the ending of this comic. It's like, so here's the guy kind of walking off. This almost mimics a comic that I did. I've never seen this, but I think a lot of these power comics, these outlaw comics, kind of end the same way with these vigilante heroes, where he's kind of walking away, and it's like the dark blanket is my escape as I slip into the night. I wish I had my book here, because it almost kind of ends the same way. But you know the perspective off. I mean, it's just like, but this is it, Black Moon. This is what I was looking for, and I'm glad I kind of picked that up. Oh, and a wraparound cover. That's pretty awesome. So one more thing I want to share with you, because we're talking about these independently published comics, and I pulled this thing out. So this I did not find at the comic store, but I think this is definitely fall in the category of an indie comic. But this one I've had in my collection for a long time. This was given to me by my college comic, the college professor that taught my comics course. This is a book that he produced when he was younger, and he self-published it. So this was given to me in 1992 when I was in, just kind of show you how old I am, when I was in art school, all right? And this was through, you know, this is my comic instructor and everything. 1992, and then I think back here, I think it was published in 1983, which I think predates Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So even before this black and white comic boom. But here it is, you know, we've got a two-color cover. You got the sort of that weird Ben-Day pattern going on right here. artwork not, I mean, obviously he improved. He did this when he was younger, so by the time he was 10 years later, he was a lot more accomplished. But looking at this, I mean, this definitely falls in line of Power Comics. But the reason why I am so fascinated by this, or the reason why this is so important to me, because it showed me that you can self-publish. You can do your own stuff. You don't have to wait to be picked up by a Marvel or a DC or whatever. And he, you know, somehow financed this book, got it out there, and that's the stuff that really got me excited and got me on the road to self-publishing. But so when I pulled this out, but it's got, I mean, tons of dialogue. It looks like he used a calligraphy pen to do all this type, so it's a little difficult to read, but I think those are some of the core things that you will find in like a Power comic or whatever. So that's just some of the stuff that I wanted to share with you today. Again, go out and look for some of these. I mean, you can be into whatever comics you're into, but these kind of rare hidden gems, the stuff that remind me of the kind of things that I was creating, that I didn't even get that far. Wherever age that this creator was, when I was at this skill level, I didn't have the wherewithal. I didn't know how to publish my own comic and everything. So the fact that they did that and got this stuff out in the world for us to kind of search out and enjoy, man, I love this stuff. So yeah, that's sort of my comic book haul from Mile High Comics. All right, so those are some of the comic books that I picked up on my journey to Mile High Comics. Some of those indie, underground, outlaw, Power Comics, stuff that I really just get, when I see I just light up and I'm like, oh, this is just crazy, this is great. So, but I want to know what kind of stuff, what's like your holy grail comics? What are you looking for when you go out to a comic book store and you're digging through all that stuff and you're hoping to find? Let me know in the comments section. I will talk to you guys later. That is all. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can follow me at Serkworks on social media, and now you can support the work that I do on Patreon. Do you like making comics? Then go to Serkworks.com and pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's packed full of fonts, brushes, templates, and more. And best of all, it's totally free.